Sergeant Mason Hill didn't trust easily. Years in the military had taught him that attachments could be dangerous. They made you hesitate. They made you vulnerable. But when he was assigned to the K-9 unit, something shifted. That's when he met Rocco. Rocco wasn't just any dog. He was a Belgian Malinois, bred for strength, speed, and an uncanny ability to read danger before it struck. But what made Rocco stand out wasn't his bite or his training scores. It was his eyes. Focused, sharp, unshakable. The kind of eyes that watched everything, missed nothing, and seemed to see straight through a man. Their first meeting was quiet. No barking, no jumping, just a silent stare, as if Rocco was already trying to decide whether Hill was worth trusting. Hill, covered in desert dust and carrying more baggage than his uniform showed, knelt down and simply said, "Let's get this over with." It wasn't love at first sight. Training together was intense. Hill barked orders, Rocco tested boundaries. But something happened in the friction. Hill saw how Rocco never backed down from a challenge, never flinched in chaos. Rocco, in return, began to follow Hill's voice even when others shouted louder. They moved through obstacle courses like one body, clearing walls, diving through tunnels, tracking scents. It was all precision, but it was also becoming something more. Other soldiers noticed. They joked that Rocco could read Hill's mind, and sometimes it felt true. In the field, Hill didn't need to speak. A glance, a shift in breath, and Rocco was already moving. Their connection was quiet but powerful. Hill started talking to him when no one else was around, telling him things he couldn't say to anyone else, about the dreams, about the silence that followed explosions, about the names he remembered but never spoke out loud. Rocco never judged. He never turned away. He just listened, ears perked, always present. Over time, Hill stopped calling him the dog. He was just Rocco, a partner, a brother. When deployment orders came, Hill didn't flinch. He'd seen combat before, but this time it was different. This time, he wasn't going alone. As the plane roared down the runway, Hill looked at Rocco lying calmly beside him. One hand rested on the dog's back, steady and firm. "You stay with me," Hill said softly. And Rocco, ever alert, never blinked. The air was thick with heat and tension as Sergeant Mason Hill's boots hit the dry soil of the valley. The sun hovered low in the sky, casting long shadows over the jagged terrain. Beside him, Rocco moved silently, ears twitching with every shift in the wind. This was supposed to be a low-risk patrol, just a routine sweep of the outer sector to check for movement. But in Hill's gut, something felt off. The unit was spread out in a tactical line, eyes scanning, rifles ready. The valley was quiet, too quiet. No wind, no birds, no sound except the crunch of their steps over gravel. Hill felt Rocco stiffen beside him. The dog's tail lowered, his ears locked forward. That was all the warning Hill got. The first explosion ripped through the rocks above. Ambush. Someone shouted, but the word was nearly drowned out by gunfire erupting from both sides of the narrow pass. Dust exploded into the air as bullets cracked against stone. Hill dove for cover behind a boulder, Rocco right beside him, low to the ground and alert. "Fall back." Their lieutenant ordered through the radio, but visibility was nearly gone. Smoke, dust, chaos. It swallowed everything. Hill saw a younger soldier frozen in the open, too stunned to move. Without thinking, Hill sprinted out of cover, grabbed the soldier by the vest, and pulled him towards safety. A sharp pain tore through his side. Had been hit. His knees buckled as he collapsed behind a ridge. The soldier was safe, but Hill was bleeding fast. Rocco barked and rushed at him, sniffing the wound, circling tight. Hill tried to press his hand to the injury, but the world was spinning. Around them, the rest of the unit was forced to retreat under heavy fire, unable to reach them in the confusion. "Rocco," Hill whispered, barely able to focus. "Stay low. Stay with me." Rocco didn't leave his side. He crouched protectively over Hill, growling at every sound, watching the smoke for signs of movement. Minutes passed like hours. The sounds of battle grew distant. Then came silence. Hill drifted in and out of consciousness. The ground felt colder now, drier. The pain faded to a numb throb. But every time his eyes fluttered open, he saw the same thing. Rocco's outline beside him, motionless but awake, ears tuned to the wind. They were alone now, behind enemy lines, no backup, no medic, just a wounded man and his loyal dog. But Rocco had no plans to leave. Night fell fast in the valley. The sun vanished behind jagged cliffs, and the shadows swallowed everything. The temperature dropped sharply, the desert's cruel contrast setting in. Sergeant Hill lay motionless against the rocky ground, sweat dried on his skin, his uniform dark with blood. His breathing was shallow. The pain had dulled, replaced by a strange, cold heaviness. Rocco never moved far. The Belgian Malinois paced tight circles around his handler, nose low, ears perked. Every rustle of wind made him pause. Every shifting stone drew his eyes. He didn't sleep. He didn't rest. He only watched and protected. As darkness deepened, predators emerged from the silence. A pair of jackals crept along the ridge, their glowing eyes catching the moonlight. Rocco stood his ground. His body lowered, teeth bared, a growl rising in his throat like a warning from the earth itself. The jackals paused, then turned. They wanted nothing to do with him. Rocco returned to Hill, sniffing his face gently, nudging his chest with his snout. Hill stirred slightly, a pained breath escaping his lips. He was alive, but just barely. Rocco sat beside him, never letting his eyes drift from the terrain. He pressed his body close, wrapping warmth around the man who had once saved his life. Hours passed. When thirst became unbearable, Rocco left only briefly, returning with his muzzle soaked from a nearby puddle. He licked Hill's lips, enough to give moisture, just enough. Then he returned to his post. By morning, the wound had stopped bleeding, but Hill's skin was pale. Flies began to gather. Rocco snapped at them, relentless. He licked at the dried blood, cleaning the injury the way instinct told him. His training had taught him how to find explosives, how to alert for danger. But this wasn't training. This was loyalty. This was something no command could teach. The sun rose again, casting gold light over the valley floor. Rocco's body was stiff from tension, but he didn't waver. He stared into the horizon, waiting for movement, a sound, anything that might bring help. Anything that might save the only person who had ever seen him as more than a tool. There were no footsteps yet, no voices, no rescue. But Rocco didn't know the meaning of giving up. He was a soldier's shadow, a silent guardian. And as long as Hill was breathing, he would not leave. Back at base, the mood had shifted from tense to grim. Sergeant Hill and Rocco had missed 2 check-ins. Communications were dead. The valley they patrolled was known for sudden radio blackouts, but this felt different. Something was wrong. Lieutenant Carter paced the command tent, watching the satellite feed flicker in and out. "We've lost visual since the ambush," he said, his voice tight. "They were last seen near the southern ridge. After that, nothing." A search team had already been dispatched at first light, but the valley was unforgiving. Sharp drops, twisted ravines, thick pockets of brush that could hide anything. The heat didn't help, neither did the silence. Every step felt like they were chasing ghosts. Meanwhile, Rocco hadn't stopped moving. It had been over 30 hours since the ambush. Hill's breathing was uneven, rattling in his chest. The blood had dried, but infection was setting in. His lips were cracked. His skin burned hot, then suddenly cold. Fever was taking hold. Rocco had dragged Hill's limp body further down the ravine, inch by painful inch, away from open terrain and into a narrow, shadowed crevice. It wasn't shelter, but it was something. There he sat guard, nose twitching at every change in wind. He hadn't eaten, hadn't rested, only watched, only waited. Miles away, a drone team reviewed thermal scans, frame by frame. Most of the terrain was empty. Sun-baked rocks, dead brush, shadows too deep to read. But one flicker caught the operator's eye. Just a flicker. Small, faint, but warm. "Zoom in," the technician said, leaning closer. There it was again. Not one, but two heat signatures, side by side. Barely moving, but still there. Within minutes, coordinates were locked. A rescue chopper was airborne, blades slicing through the desert sky. On board, the medic team was prepped. One of them, a K-9 handler himself, stared out at the mountains and whispered, "Hang on, buddy." Back in the ravine, Rocco heard it before anyone saw it, a low hum in the distance. His ears perked, his head tilted. Then, for the first time in over a day, his tail moved. He stood, climbed the ridge, and barked. Loud, sharp, desperate. Again and again, until it echoed across the rocks. It wasn't just noise, it was a signal. He knew someone was coming. And this time, he wasn't alone. The helicopter cut through the dusty air like a blade, its thumping rotors echoing off the canyon walls. Inside, the rescue team sat silent, eyes locked on the terrain below. They had the coordinates. They had the heat signatures. But in a place like this, nothing was certain. "Keep your eyes sharp," the lead medic shouted over the noise. "We've got one shot." Down below, Rocco stood at the ridge's edge, tail rigid, body tense. Dust whipped around him, stinging his eyes, but he didn't flinch. He barked again, louder this time, voice hoarse from exhaustion. The sound pierced the canyon like a flare, raw, urgent, alive. In the cockpit, the pilot spotted something. Movement. Left ridge. The chopper banked sharply, dipping low. Dust exploded upward. And then, through the swirling chaos, they saw him, Rocco, standing like a statue of defiance, guarding something hidden just beyond the rocks. The medic team fast roped down before the skids even touched the ground. They raced toward the ridge, weapons drawn, unsure of what they'd find. As they crested the rocks, the scene froze them mid-stride. Sergeant Hill lay motionless, skin pale, lips dry and cracked. His uniform was soaked with blood, his pulse faint. But he was alive. Barely. And Rocco? He didn't move as the soldiers approached. He stood over Hill, growling softly, muscles tight. It wasn't aggression. It was instinct. Protection. "Easy, boy," one medic said gently, kneeling down. "We're here to help." Rocco looked into the man's eyes, searching for truth. Then, slowly, he stepped aside, but not far. Just enough to let them reach Hill. Pulse is weak. BP's crashing. "He's septic," the medic called out. "We need evac now." They stabilized Hill as fast as they could, starting fluids, sealing wounds, lifting him onto a stretcher. As they carried him toward the chopper, Rocco followed, never more than a foot away. When they reached the ramp, one soldier tried to stop the dog from boarding. "He's not cleared tow." "He's coming," the medic snapped. "He's the reason we're even here." No one argued. Inside the chopper, Rocco pressed himself against Hill's side, head low, eyes alert. The roar of the blades was deafening, but the dog never moved. He didn't care about the noise. He didn't care about the medals or the mission logs. All he cared about was that his soldier was still breathing, and he wasn't going to let him go now. The helicopter's descent was a blur. The whirling blades cut through the air, but to Sergeant Mason Hill, everything felt distant, muffled. His body was an aching mass of pain and fever, and his mind felt like it was drifting farther from reality with every passing second. But through the haze, there was something constant, a pressure against his side, warm, firm, and unyielding. Rocco. The Belgian Malinois never left his side, not for a moment. Even when the medics moved him, when they jabbed needles into his arm and adjusted his oxygen mask, Rocco stayed close, never more than a few inches away. He sat on the cold metal floor of the chopper, eyes fixed on Hill's face, his body as tense as a bowstring. The dog's heavy breathing was the only sound that felt real. "We're losing him," a medic said, a note of panic creeping into his voice. "BP's dropping again. We need to stabilize him, or we're not going to make it to the hospital." Another medic nodded, adjusting the IV drip. "We're almost there." "Hold on, Sergeant. Just hold on." But Hill's pulse was faint, slipping in and out like a dying ember. The world around him blurred. His thoughts fragmented. He was fading, slipping into a dark place where nothing mattered except the quiet. But even in that stillness, he could hear Rocco's soft growl, steady and low, as if the dog was trying to pull him back from the edge. Rocco nudged his face with his nose, a soft pressure, a constant anchor. His body pressed against Hill's side, warm and solid. It wasn't enough to keep the darkness at bay, but it was something, the one thing that remained. When the chopper touched down, a team of doctors rushed forward, ready to pull Hill from the stretcher and rush him into the ER. But as they moved him, Rocco barked sharply, jumping to his feet, eyes wild with protectiveness. "Easy, easy," one of the medics said, trying to calm the dog. But Rocco didn't stop. He snapped his teeth, trying to nudge his way closer to Hill, as if saying, "Not yet." Finally, they allowed the dog to follow them, keeping him close enough that his presence could soothe Hill. The emergency room doors slid open, and the team rushed the surgeon inside, where they could try to save his life. In that sterile white light, Rocco stood at the entrance, pacing back and forth. His paws clicked against the floor. His eyes never left the door. He wasn't going to leave Hill. Not now. Not ever. The fight wasn't over. It had just begun. Sergeant Hill woke slowly, the world around him blurred and disorienting. His body felt like it had been through a war, every inch of him aching raw. But the pain wasn't as sharp as it had been in the desert. There was a dullness to it now, like his body was struggling to catch up with his mind. As his eyes adjusted to the hospital room, the first thing he saw was the familiar figure by his side, Rocco. The dog was lying on the floor beside the bed, his head resting on his paws, eyes alert but soft. His tail thumped gently against the tile, a small sign of relief. Rocco's chest rose and fell in steady rhythm, and the moment Hill shifted in the bed, the dog's ears perked. He was awake, always awake. "Hey, buddy," Hill whispered, his voice hoarse. He tried to smile, but his lips barely moved. He reached out a trembling hand, brushing Rocco's fur. The dog licked his fingers, a warm, reassuring gesture. "You saved my life," Hill muttered, his throat tight with emotion. Rocco didn't respond with anything grand. He didn't need to. His presence said it all. The dog had been by Hill's side through every moment of that nightmare. He had never left him, not even when the odds were stacked against them. He had kept watch when Hill was unconscious, never once straying, always alert for danger. And when rescue had finally come, Rocco had been the beacon that led them to him. The news of Hill's survival had spread like wildfire. His story, along with Rocco's, became a symbol of loyalty and devotion. The press wanted interviews. The military brass wanted recognition. Everyone wanted to honor the K9 who had saved his handler's life. But for Hill, none of that mattered. He knew what Rocco had done. They both did. The dog didn't need a medal. He didn't need a ceremony. He just needed to be there, like he always was. Still, the world didn't let that go unnoticed. Rocco was awarded a rare military distinction, presented at a ceremony where the whole unit stood behind him. Hill was there too, in a wheelchair, still recovering but filled with pride. He knew he owed everything to Rocco, his life, his future. When the applause died down, Hill whispered to his dog, "You're my hero, Rocco. Always will be." Rocco's tail wagged once, then rested back on the floor, calm and content. He had done his job. And now, finally, they could go home. The sun had set by the time Sergeant Hill and Rocco finally arrived back at the small house that had once felt so ordinary, but now seemed like a sanctuary. Hill was still recovering, his body marked by the battle he'd fought, but he was alive. He was home. Rocco, too, was home. The dog's eyes sparkled with the same quiet intensity that had always been there, but now there was peace in them, a soft contentment that Hill had never seen before. They had fought together, survived together, and now they were here together. In the quiet of the home they shared, nothing else mattered. Hill wheeled himself out of the car, his legs still weak but stronger every day. He paused, taking a deep breath of the cool evening air, and looked over at Rocco, who was already at his side, tail wagging slowly. "Let's go inside, boy," Hill said with a quiet chuckle. Rocco trotted ahead, ears perked, and with a soft push, Hill followed. The door creaked open, and the scent of home, of simple things, filled the air. Inside, Hill had prepared a place for Rocco by the window, where he could lie and watch the world outside. The dog settled there immediately, curling into his bed, his eyes still vigilant, but now resting. Hill settled into his own chair, looking out the window at the stars that stretched across the night sky. He could almost hear the sound of the wind brushing through the desert in his mind, the memory of a life that felt so far away, but was still so present. The phone rang a few hours later, news from the military. The war was still raging, and the world was still turning, but for the first time in a long while, Hill felt like he had his footing. There would be no more missions, no more ambushes. Just this quiet, just this moment, with Rocco. "Life's good, huh, buddy?" Hill said softly, looking at the dog. Rocco looked up at him, then laid his head back down with a soft sigh, his body relaxed, his guard finally down. It was over. Hill knew he wasn't the same man who had stepped onto that plane months ago, and Rocco wasn't the same dog. They had both been changed. But what mattered now was that they were together. No more battles. No more uncertainty. Just peace. Together, they were home. And that was all they needed.